know. And by the end of the week, she's like, I really like this thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, huh, that's interesting.
Now, did it have the little partial things? Or
No,
was it wide open?
It was wide open.
Yeah.
And then so even if you don't have the windshield folded down, and even if you don't take the roof panels out,
Yeah.
or you've got the fabric top, whatever, it still feels really open.
Yeah.
The rub is that that vehicle, when you take the doors off, it takes the side mirrors off. And you can buy accessory mirrors through Mopar or one of a number of firms, but mine didn't have them.
So you just drove without them?
So I just drove without side
All right.
and so you do a lot of this, which is
Yeah.
a little unnerving, but you get used to it, and you learn to appreciate a well-placed center rearview mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's nothing like driving around in a vehicle with no doors on when the weather's nice
It's
outside.
fantastic.
It's fantastic.
It really is.
Right.
Yeah. I think we missed that because all of our cars today are like bunkers. You got huge pillars, and the sills are so high.
That's something. I used to get more questions. I taught for a while at CCS downtown.
Yeah.
And I got more questions about that one subject than probably all the other ones. Like, why are they like this, and why is it so thick? And you kind of go through the set of rules, and then you realize some of it's subjective.
Mm-hmm. I remember. Kind of like post 9/11, when we started seeing belt lines rising and roofs going down, and concepts that looked like armored cars, whether it was from Hummer or there was was it Model U from Ford, which literally looked like a little armored car or whatever, and people were linking that to the state of politics and the sort of taking everybody's temperature about how they feel about the outside world.
Well, the Chrysler 300 was one of the first ones that really got that sort of sinister, chopped, for lack of terminology, look, and they kind of took off from there. Are you a motorcycle guy?
I'm not. I've thought about it an awful lot and have wisely stayed away from it to this point. But
physics don't work real well. But
yeah. Well, the thing is, neither do the finances. I've got too many cars already, and the last thing I need is another expensive thing. Our daily driver is an A7. It's a 2014, but we've also got a bunch of other much less expensive things.
Yeah.
So I've got an NB Miata. I've got a Volvo 240 pickup truck conversion.
Yeah.
So that's super strange. The car that I was driving last night that reminded me of the joys of feeling open even when you're not. I have a Japanese market Nissan Pao, which we've had here in the studio, which is a little retro.
Yeah, but I didn't know there was any of them around here.
There are a handful of them in the U.S. now, since they're able to be.
Is the Florida guy?
Come on.
It's not, but it did come up through Florida.
Let's do a show.
Purchased through a
he's like a JDM guy.
No.
military doctor.
Sorry?
Let's see. We're going to need to clip a mic on you.
Oh, best shoes by far.
Huh?
Yeah.
Best shoes by far.
Best shoes?
Yeah.
You know what I learned from doing the show? I'm like, you guys never have to worry about it. I'm like, you have to pay attention from. It's none of this top-up business. I'm so sorry. I thought you were waiting.
Oh, no.
Nice chat.
No worries. I should have brought my 3D printed shoes.
Yeah, let's do that.
Oh,
So
you do?
Adidas has got these shoes, and the bottoms are
I got
3D printed. They're
like the Bugatti,
crazy
like a $13
looking.
million Bugatti, right?
Yeah. No, there's this company. In fact, we're going to have them on the show later in the year, called Carbon 3D. Which has come up with a totally different way of printing. And it's good stuff.
Oh, thanks.
Well, there's a lot of neat stuff happening.
Okay, everybody
Pretty
look.
close.
Our picture is being
we're
taken.
supposed to look?
I want some Canon ones too.
Okay.
So John's all.
Okay. Carmen, I think we're ready to go live.
Stand by.
No, if I had the space, I'd just have I've got a car on witness protection right now, so the rest of the family doesn't know about it.
Oh.
You have a car in witness protection?
Off-site.
Kansas.
Oh, it's really.
That's
off-site.
really witness
stumbling
protection.
over.
That's where you would send something.
Well,
right?
the only problem is we're live on TV right now, right?
Okay, well, that's done.
Yeah.
Internet anyway.
We're about to get started.
Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific Time. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or on YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion. Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems. And by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
All right, everybody, welcome to Autoline After Hours. Even though you heard Gary Vasilash's voice at the very beginning in the intro there, he's not here today. He's out traveling, or might be even on vacation. I'm not sure. Gary will be back next week, and ironically, I'll be gone next week. But in any case, we got a great show today. Joining us really in the second half of the show, we're going to get into the story that Phoebe Howard from the Detroit Free Press broke wide open in a big way on problems that Ford's having with its transmissions in the Fiesta and Focus, the automatic ones. But Phoebe, great having you on the show.
Thank you.
And also we've got Chris Paukert from Roadshow by CNET, and it's always great to have you on the show too.
Thank you, and it's always wonderful to be here.
And but the first half of the show is going to be dedicated to talking about design, and that's because we've got Larry Erickson, the head of design for Magna. And Larry, it's awesome to have you on the show here today with us.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here. So, you know, talking about cars is, I don't think that really qualifies as work, so we'll see how much we can enjoy it.
So my first question is, and you guys pile in after this, but why does an automotive supplier, I mean, Magna's one of the biggest in the world, the third or fourth largest in the world, right? But why does a supplier company need a head of design?
Well, I think the biggest challenges right now, and the reason why I am where I am and what we're doing, is really that to be successful with providing the right parts, you need to understand thoroughly how they fit in the larger picture. And it used to be that it was just, how do I make a water pump for a Model T? And because Henry didn't. And now it's about how does that product interact with its environment, the other stakeholders, and the other part of the system. And what are the other factors that will either improve it or possibly identify what next generation you got to be working on now. Because the lead time on automobiles, you know, it's the technologies, it's the materials, it's the manufacturing processes, you know, they're growing and growing and growing. I don't see where, you know, tools are going to make it quicker sometimes, you know. You can manage data faster and you can scan and do things like that. But some of the innovation is very broad in scope and takes a lot of stakeholders.
Do you feel the environment today, though, is that much more collaborative? It requires your engagement. In times past, not so much, but the expectation's much higher where your clients and your partners are expecting you to participate that much more today in 2019?
I think you're absolutely right. I think the collaboration now is the part of not only how do you make it together, because even though that, you know, that manufacturing facility may be off-site from the other one, the flow's got to be continuous, and everyone holds a stake in it. So the collaboration's got to happen on a lot of fronts. Intellectual property is, you know, I wouldn't say getting more challenging. It's probably challenging enough, but I think now you see that the value in things, whether it's the you know, typical patent, or whether it's a design patent, or whether it's something key to that brand, you know, that only that brand can do that way. All those things drive you towards more collaboration.
So which comes first? Does the automaker come to you and say, we need this, or do you, as Magna, create things, come up with an idea, and propose it to the automakers?
It's a little bit of both. And sometimes you'll see you know, an innovation, whether it's a material or a capability, and you almost immediately think, wow, that brand, that's like perfect for them. You know, they're warm and cuddly, and this is warm and cuddly, you know. Or it's very dramatic, and it's, you know, something along those lines. But I think what we'd like to think is that, you know, both parties are coming to the conclusion at the same time, you know. When you're working with 45 OEMs, you have a lot of interaction with them, but sometimes the interaction is more on the powertrain side or more on the exterior side, and, you know, Magna is one complete entity. So you try to take advantage of those things, whether they're tech shows or whether they're visits by the OEM or whether they're visits for us to go to their groups.
What might an example be of something that is particularly small but significant, for something that you might contribute that to a regular person would not seem like a big deal, but for a client would say, I'm really happy that you noticed that, or thank you for pointing it out, or we're going in a different direction. What might an example be?
Well, I think, you can take a lot of different attributes and look at them, but one of the ones is lighting right now. There is very much this idea that there used to be two types of lighting on a car. There was exterior signal lighting, and then there was a lighting inside when you open the door. Now lighting sets up a personality, or it furthers a relationship. So this idea that exterior lighting is important before the vehicle even starts. There's lots of legislation once it's moving, but when it's sitting in the parking lot or it's waiting or whatever it is, it now becomes, okay, does that brand have a way of connecting with their user, certain personality? Jeep's very specific, other people like that.
What would be the one that comes to mind, of course, is Lincoln, right? Yep. They've got the light as you approach your car, it's like your welcome mat light.
Right.
But what are some other examples you're talking about exterior lighting that you can?
I think the lighting sequence that lets you know the car is ready and you're going to go. This is particularly true with electric vehicles because there's literally no noise. There's no vibration, there's nothing. There's just, I'm ready. Well, that feeling of you're ready, maybe that can start as you approach the car. You know that when you get in, you push a button, it's going to go. It's not 3 other buttons or your phone or something, or maybe you want it to be your phone, So I think there's possibilities there.
Magna's a fascinating supplier company. It can do more of a total vehicle than any other supplier that I'm aware of. You can design it, your job, engineer it, develop it, even manufacture it. That is a final assembly. You guys ever look at doing entire cars? And I know Magna worked very closely with a Vietnamese company, VinFast. Were you involved in the design of their car in that?
No, that was through the European, I think it was Magna Steyr, but I think the main reason for the breadth, the sort of cradle to grave, is so we can support the working relationship. We're not a brand that has a car, and I don't think that's the type of thing that makes Magna great.
Even though it did play with one. What was it, back in the 80s or 90s?
I was just in high school.
Yeah. Okay.
That one I don't know about.
Okay.
But I do think that to be so good at supplying the right parts, knowing how to develop the technologies at the right time, and being sensitive in regards to the manufacturing facilities and allocation where things are, that you really got to approach it as a holistic process. That doesn't mean you want to make a car. You just want to make great parts. So.
You mentioned how lighting has changed significantly. Instead of just being, you were joking, or you were saying that it was 2 modes. I was thinking on or off is what it used to be. But I'm wondering, that's a growth area probably for you. What other areas are growth areas in terms of design for Magna? And conversely, what areas are pulling back some?
Well, I think that you look at vehicle volumes, 1965, everything was running at 1 million units and there was 15 different trim levels, Now there's more differentiation as far as top hats go. So when those volumes move a little lower, that brings in a lot of other possibilities. Also the advent of all these sensors, and there's probably going to be more before there's fewer. You can't push a signal through a steel panel. You got to push it through a composite panel or something that's favorable to that. So I think you'll see the opportunity to not only incorporate technologies with certain types of panels and certain materials, but you'll also see the ability to form and make things. You're mentioning printing, which is a little farther out there, but with like thermoplastic panels and things like that, you can get a lot of form and shape that you can't do in other ways. So we look at how the trends are changing and how the materials are changing, and then look for the opportunities to either invent something there or to work with one of our customers in something they're trying to accomplish.
You must have a design studio then?
Yes, but we're primarily digital. So the picture of the clay model up in the corner is a nice
On our backdrop
reminder
here
of
in the studio, yeah.
backdrop. No, and a lot of work is done digital. You know, clay modeling will always be there when you get the full properties, but we're usually putting something in either a context that's agnostic, because you don't want to go to company A and show them car B or something like that. So you want to make something neutral as far as a brand goes. But we do make quite a bit of what I would say, you know, somebody may look at it and think, okay, well, that's a marketing thing, you know, that's part of the sales process. But really, it's part of the collaboration process and part of the innovation process. Because until you put it in the right context and you really start working with it, even if it's just digitally, there's a lot to be discovered. Now, you know, one of the things right now is all the signage on the outside of cars. You know, there's a lot of talk about it. There's not so much, you know, available right now. But you see the way people are going to interact with cars. They're going to need information at different points. And, you know, that's going to present opportunities.
What do you mean by that when you say the signage outside cars?
Well,
could you clarify?
You know, the back of the car where you normally have a brand and a model, and that's it. If you could configure that and you could turn that into other information, you could bring yourself up to speed with what you're about to do, even though your hands are full.
Like what? Like what? Like what?
Well, so you're getting in your car and you're tight for time, and you know you're going to the airport and you want to know how much time it is. You know, it literally can tell you that information as you're walking up to it. But it's also, maybe you're having a package delivered through Amazon or someone that when you do that at work, it's a lot easier to do. And when it's at your home, which is 30 miles away, it's a lot more of a problem. So I think there's lots of communication with these cars that can take place using exterior surfaces.
So would it almost be like an advertising screen in some capacity? Is that what you're thinking on the back of the vehicle?
There are people that I'm sure are, you know, thinking about that, you know, and probably inventing things right now. But a lot of what we focus on is how these brands connect with their customer, give them information, bring them up to speed, things like that. And sometimes it's something simple. It's just a little area of the car, you know. So
we're getting some questions here from the audience. And by the way, if you'd like to get questions in, if you're watching the show, shoot us an email. Send it to viewermail@autoline.tv. You can also give us a phone call to 1-620-288-6546. Or you can post off to us through Twitter and Instagram and all that as well. But anyway, S10 Baja wants to know if you can give him an idea how old platforms work versus new electric vehicle platforms. Because the EV1 seems to be a lot more flexible and the like, and would seem to be able to give automakers a lot more room to play around with. Does that impact you at Magna too? Do you see it that way?
Yes, in some areas, you know, dramatically. In other areas, it varies. But if you think of all of the componentry that's in an electric vehicle, and again, these things are changing, you know, literally in size and configuration day to day. Other things will not change. You know, you need cabling to connect these things. Some of those technologies may evolve. But I think the first group of electric vehicles that come through the gate evolved to a certain degree off of what was available and the componentry is available. But, you know, one of the good examples is the Model S, where the radiators basically sit forward of the wheels, down low. And one of the reasons I would imagine they wanted to do that was to maximize that space in that, you know, the frunk or the front trunk or whatever you want to call it. So in general, electric cars have probably just as many things, maybe more quantity, smaller size, but they're distributed differently and they're broken up. And that gives you opportunities to place things in different orientation. And Tesla did a pretty incredible job to start with, you know. I think you're starting to see some of that in the Rivian SUV and the pickup, you know. And I think that'll continue to improve. the analogy I look back to is when 5-mile-an-hour bumpers came into cars. Remember, it used to look like somebody stuck a guardrail on the end of it.
They were horrible.
And then generation over generation, they whittled and they got that down. And now, the offset barrier on a car is an incredible accomplishment. I mean, cars are just fantastic at taking hits. Those old bumpers that look like a girder were, probably 3 times as heavy and much less effective. So I think you'll see a lot of improvement in the process, but initially some of the things that limit the OEM from taking full advantage of this sort of breakup of the components will mean that the first times through the gate, it's an evolution. Mm-hmm. That's all.
How did you come to Magna? What's your background?
Let's see. My high school teacher told me no one ever got a job drawing cars. So then I got a job drawing cars at General Motors. So I worked in their design group for about 14 years. I went to Ford because there was an offer to go to Europe, and my wife's from Europe, and I thought, oh, this is great, And then I had this idea that working 9 months out of the year would be a great idea. So I went to education. I taught at CCS for a while. And then I had an opportunity to join a startup. So I was with Rivian. Mm-hmm. And then I moved to Magna. It just fit my life stage a lot better. And then the great thing about Magna is there's all these people that know exactly everything about that thing. So one Mark spelled with a K is like the materials guy, and another Mark spelled with a C is the mold release guy, or the directional pull or whatever it is. And I think it's that opportunity to always keep learning. I took parts or cars apart as a kid, but when you see those differences in those platforms and the differences in the way the industry's changed in 30-some years, it's an exciting time. It really is.
By the way, what you just said, those words, that is the funniest description. That is the most, people would pay millions of dollars to have. It is the company that has everybody that knows everything about that thing. Yeah. Because in the auto industry, that there are millions of that thing.
Oh, yeah.
But you synthesize exactly what Magna is so simply, and it's such an important, it's very rare, the depth of expertise that one company brings to so much.
There's an advertising guy said it's not how good you are, it's how good you want to be. And they got a great drive at doing the absolute best they can on that thing. And, when I joined General Motors in their design group, and I didn't realize it till I left, but they were just phenomenal. Chuck Jordan was the vice president, Dave Holes, Jerry Palmer, guys like that. They were just like the A-team, they were just an incredible group of people. And that's when you learn. You learned a little in school, but you learn a lot in a job.
How is it working with all these different OEMs? I would imagine that they have different styles of management and different processes. Without naming names, because I imagine you can't do that. How different are they? And can you give us some examples of where things are pole to pole?
Well, I think, in the whole 45, it's probably dramatically different from one end to another. But for us on the design side, I think how they see themselves, in other words, what's their internal drive? Do they want to be, is it more affordability? Is it more excellence of technology? How is it? Magna's organized in a way to where you have the sales organization, you have the manufacturing side of things, you have the engineering side of things. So in a lot of cases, it's once you get the team together and you see them interact with an OEM as a cross-functional group, then you start to get a better feel for it. I've been there for about 2 years, and it's great to talk to one of the guys about, whether it's Honda and the way they work and what's important to them. But Magna's very good at making those adjustments so that they work with a team on a collaborative level that's valuable to them. And you know, everyone wants to cover all the bases, but it's really how they cover the bases.
Do automakers bring you in early on a program? I know in years ago, they'd throw the blueprints out to suppliers and say, here, build the spec.
Yeah.
And then there was a move to bring suppliers in a little bit earlier. And then there was a move, especially on interiors, just to turn the whole thing over to suppliers.
Yeah.
Then they pulled back from that. Where do we stand right now? And the reason I'm asking is, every supplier's always told me this. God, if they'd only bring us in early, man, could we give them a lot of great ideas to make things look better, work better, or cost less?
It varies, and I think what you find now is that a lot of them know that they can't simply do everything possible. You know, when I joined General Motors, they just finished making the rare earth magnet. I mean, there was 2 companies in the whole world, and GM was one of them. You know, they made their own magnets. And now I think what the company sees, especially this wave of integration of technology, takes a lot more of that collaboration, and you have to do it at the right time. So I think those early efforts, say, 10 years ago to now to about 5 years ago, I think they really opened everybody's eyes up. I was at Ford at that time, and you could see that everyone knew it would take a different approach, and I think electrical drivetrains will do a similar effect, if it hasn't happened already. So there are people doing more advanced things, either technology fairs or something like that. I think everyone naturally needs to work hard at the intellectual property that's at hand. But I think Silicon Valley probably piloted a lot of those early phases and relationships. So there's probably a model out there that works very well. We would like to, one of the reasons for the design group was to build up our design group, was to have a dialogue with the groups early, because the design community is like a half degree removed. Everybody went to school. My roommate in college was a head of BMW design, and all this other stuff.
Which college?
What's that?
Which college?
Art Center. So there's only like 6 of them. There's Art Center, CCS, Royal College, Pforzheim, Coventry, kind of.
But you say that like your roommate went to BMW and you went to GM and Ford. I mean, that's.
Oh no, he went to GM too. It was Chris Bangle. So he started at GM and then moved from there to Fiat. But
Bangle was your roommate.
Yeah, for about 6 months, and it left an emotional scar. We won't get into that.
So you probably couldn't find the silverware. You're like, things are in the wrong place. But I finished. I think my scholarship job was finishing J. Mays' senior model. So because the design side is really, closed in, and because of the auto shows, and you have these, it's a chance to talk to those people. And even though a lot of that is, light conversation, it also gives you the ability to start a conversation.
So just out of curiosity, where were you in school as a young boy, where they told you that you couldn't make money drawing cars? Where was that?
It was in Northern California. So
okay, because I was going to say it could not have been in the state of Michigan. Okay,
no,
but Northern
knew
California.
About design, but I don't think most people knew about design. I don't even know if it was in a term in 1975.
Huh, okay.
I think this idea that you were an engineer. In fact, my grandmother, bless her heart, till the day she left, said, "Oh, you're an engineer." That's what her mind was, because it didn't equate. So a lot of people struggle with that term design. Now it's sort of broadened out to include everybody, So.
Mm-hmm. Hey, we've got a few questions more here. Let's go into this. Joey's cleaning lady wrote in to say, what vehicles on the exterior has Magna designed? He says he assumes you're not doing full vehicles a la Pininfarina.
Yeah, but our design support is not to release a surface. Every Class A surface comes from them.
From the OEM.
Right. So we don't release what's called Class A, which is the exterior of the car. We will make, again, digital models and representations of ideas to move that dialogue along or that collaboration along. But it really is not us releasing surface.
Okay, Ray Mitrowitz wrote in to say, is Magna hiring recent college grads right now? He says he's having a devil of a time landing a job as a mechanical engineer.
I think right now, Magna's still hiring people. other departments. I know we've got as many as we need, but I think the whole of the industry there's a little bit of this sort of apprehension.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what it's going to cost right now.
Yeah.
And you don't know who you're going to need to solve that problem. So you got to stay at it. I know that's probably pretty lame.
Pretty lame, but that's what you got to do. You got to stick to it. Yeah.
But who you need to solve that problem is an interesting thought exercise, and it probably places a company like Magna very well, since you have the mark with a C that does this and the mark with a K that does that. You've got all...
Right. It does help enormously. I think, like a lot of things, the next problem isn't there yet. You know, it could be a reflection of the ones you have. And knowing those core skill sets is what really helps in those times of change.
Ray also goes on to ask, does Magna ever work on exterior components and have to bring it back to the car companies and go, hey, this just isn't going to work. You got to change it.
Well, you know, that's probably happened lots of times. What you want to do is to, you know, when you have a situation that isn't working out, because a lot of times we're working on things that are under development, you know, and in areas that are new, like so active aero's a very new area, you know, parts that move and sort of reposition. Oh. And yeah, you know, first time a Porsche did that, you thought, is that broken or is that, no. But
of the car raising up and down for aerodynamics?
Surfaces of the car changing in position. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of new ground. And to do those things, sometimes you need to change surface. The things you want to do is change it the least and understand what's important in that surface. You know, what in that original release was significant. And we help in those conversations.
Mm-hmm. So if I went into your studio, what would I see? No clay,
lots
obviously.
Of paper. Lots of paper. Printers. The printers are downstairs, but they'll print things. So, but
3D print.
3D. That's
right,
my question.
Yeah, 3D
all
printers,
3D printing. Okay.
But like we work with an innovation group, and they've been running wind tunnel tests and things like that. So we'll print full-size objects sometimes, and sometimes things are scale. But there's a lot of digital review too.
Mm-hmm. Is it? It's all in CAD. I mean, you're doing everything in the computer. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Do you design at home? Like, do you work on paper yourself when you're sort of sketching
well, we
ideas?
work on paper.
You
know,
do?
we
Okay.
draw still.
Okay.
Almost all designers at this point have a manual drawing at some point in the process, scan it in, and then turn it into a more finished piece. Mm-hmm. Now, there are tools coming that can literally, you know, you can reach into something with a glove or a sensory input and pull it back. So I don't think it'll replace clay, but it'll definitely move the forward portions of the program, you know, where you're roughing things in, you're moving at a quick rate. So it's exciting.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Every designer who ever comes in here doesn't believe that clay is going away.
Yeah.
Well, I think the material may change, but to see something three-dimensional, even with really good holograms and things like that, it's the weight of it. And perspective, because it is, you know, one of our fundamental skills of seeing, you've got to see the object. And I have a friend used to be at one of the OEM clay studios, and they did a show car in only third scale, okay? And then they blew it up, and the correlation was pretty good. But usually with production cars, a lot of times the quality problems you're solving are almost, they're very small scale. They're very specific. So you've got to use all the tools you can to get through that.
Yeah, very interesting. Larry, we're going to have to wrap this up, but thanks so much for coming on the show.
Oh, well, thanks for the invitation.
I'm just amazed, you know, and I know Magna's not the only supplier with designers, but I'm always intrigued by that.
Well, it's, you know, it just goes to show how complex, you know, it's no longer just a part and does it open the door. It's a lot more than that. And all these technologies, whether they're lighting or sensors or material changes, they're going to, you know, people are going to seek comfort and convenience. You know, they're going to seek desire. They want it to be the way they want it to be.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of that's going away.
Real good. Well, once again, thanks for coming on the show.
you're welcome.
Stay seated. We're going to take a quick commercial break right now. We're going to come back. We're going to be talking with Phoebe Howard. This mega story that she's just blown wide open with the Ford transmission. We're going to be getting into the details on that.
Lear Connexus offers a parental controls application with geofencing that sends notifications regarding driving behavior and location, including curfew alerts, acceleration alerts, and speed alerts. All delivered to a smartphone application that includes vehicle location, driver notifications, and a report card of driving history, including notifications when predefined geographic boundaries are crossed. For more information, visit Lear.com.
The world is changing at an ever-increasing pace. No matter what the mode of transportation, there is always the need for an efficient propulsion system. And that's exactly what BorgWarner has been doing since the earliest days of the automotive industry. We create innovative mobility technologies that reduce energy consumption and emissions while improving performance. Our proven track record has made us an industry leader in forward-looking propulsion solutions for combustion, hybrid, and electric vehicles.
All right, we're back. Very interesting talking with Larry Erickson. I mean, like I said, I'm intrigued. We all know that every car company's got its own design studio, but there's a number of suppliers that have got design studios.
Okay, but here's the thing. When you talk about all these major companies and Magna specifically, it seems like, to me, the auto industry anymore is all about problem solving. That each company has major problems and challenges. They don't want to call them problems externally, but internally there are issues. You know, you've got technology where the designers and engineers right now, you know, you can't identify things you need to because of beards. That's a huge problem for, you know, facial recognition in the vehicles. Or sunglasses, or holding a coffee cup, where you have sensors and cameras that need to do certain things for autonomy and driver assistance. So it's to me that role of collaboration. It used to be sort of trendy and it says nothing, but I think it's really important now. I mean, I think these companies are like, you know, what am I not seeing? What do you see? And what do I need to be looking for? Much more. I mean, don't you think so?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, look, especially with this move to electric cars, autonomous cars, connected cars, mobility services. It was hard enough for them to do everything in the good old days. Now you layer all these technologies on and developments, and you got to get going. Sometimes it's by government diktat, you know, other times it's Wall Street breathing down your neck. But you're right, there is more collaboration today because they simply can't do it without it.
Well, if you look at the component count of an average vehicle now versus what it used to be in the 50s, I mean, you know, it's exponentially.
Yeah, well, you know,
more complicated.
just think, you know, a typical pickup truck has 100 million lines of code plus. Yeah. So that's crazy.
That's an amazing data point.
I know.
Yeah, and think about we're on the cusp of the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, and the amount of code that
smartphones
required.
are smarter than what they
way,
went to
way
the moon
smarter.
on.
Yeah.
So that's crazy. Hey, but let's get into the story that you broke. Speaking of complexity in cars, you've got this wow of a story in the Detroit Free Press about problems that Ford has had with its dual clutch transmissions in the Focus and the Fiesta. And this past Sunday, it was front page. And what you have, like how many pages inside?
7 pages.
7 pages
So
inside the front
so it
section.
was USA Today, Friday front page, banner story. And then Sunday in the Detroit Free Press, it was 6 full pages and then the cover, the full cover, in fact, which is very, very rare. But the company felt...
Full cover, you mean full front page?
It was one story front page for the Sunday Detroit Free Press.
Above and below the fold.
Above and below the fold.
That never happens.
It's very, very rare. It's considered a high priority for the company because how much we value automakers, how much we value the industry. And the way this came about is so intriguing. And I want to ask you, I want to set up the story, but really I've had callers call and ask me about F-150s, and I want to talk to you about the relationship of that to this story from consumers. It's really interesting. But the long and short of it is, in the month of April, Ford Motor Company submitted a Securities and Exchange report for shareholder awareness saying in April 2019, last page of a report, 70 pages, last little item was we want to make our shareholders aware that we have this issue. And it's a
with the transmission.
With the what it said was with DPS 6, which I have to confess, until April 2019, I was not well versed on DPS 6, and so I saw this in the report.
Now wait, that's the internal code number name for the transmission.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so that's how it's termed. And so I sat down and I thought, okay, this is something enough that is enough of the company's concern. The second to last item was a Department of Justice investigation for the most recent issue that's being looked into, and the company's cooperating. But this followed that. So I started doing research and discovered that incredible, huge settlement on this very issue in Australia, huge fine from the government, first class action victory in Thailand, Ford Fiestas, Ford Focus, these years.
So it's not just in the U.S.
It's not the U.S. There are cases pending in Canada. There are cases pending in Israel. It is the exact issue. Again, major fines and litigation losses for Ford in those other two countries. And in the U.S., the only case that has gone to trial was a tremendous loss for Ford Motor Company. They ceded responsibility for the vehicle, and they fought on the fraud allegation in court. So cases are not going to trial. A lot of are being settled. But there's a class action pending review right now. So that sets that up. The issue is what consumers in this lawsuit have alleged. What's very interesting when you read all these cases in different countries is that everyone gives car companies a pass for mistakes. People understand your car is going to go wrong, really dumb mistakes. I mean, it's astonishing to me how forgiving the public is, and they'll tell me that. But the feeling on this, and it's again, the alert in the SEC report, and more importantly, the cases pending and the internal memos with Ford, is the issue and allegation of cover-up. So it's not making the mistake. It's, to me, the Bill Clinton rule. It is not what is the alleged offense. It is how did you address your alleged offense. And I think the U.S. in particular, consumers, voters, people are very forgiving generally if you say we've made a mistake, we've acknowledged our wrongs, and we're moving forward now. I don't know if that applies here for Ford, but the story that came out is about the company all based on internal emails, documents, memos, presentations from 2008, where the company was saying for these transmissions, we're having problems before launch. We're having problems before they're sold.
This is via internal documents.
All internal.
This was not for public consumption.
Everything was internal. Documents were marked secret. Everything was Ford Motor Company documents that had recently, just a few months ago, been available to the public. They were confidential in the court system. And so when I researched this, I started digging and digging, going, what's going on? Why are they so concerned? I found these documents. And again, the entire package, which is on the website, and people have been coming in, mail from every part of America except Hawaii. And but people have just been really intrigued because they've gone in saying, I'm on the highway. There are many reports where people are driving down the highway going 65, 70 miles an hour, and all of a sudden, there's no power. They can feel a loss of power, and they work to get to the side of the road. The company has consistently maintained that if you have a blinker, if you can apply your brakes, if you have use of your horn, that it is not a safety issue because you can navigate off the road. The concern in all the filings with federal regulators is that safe? If you have trucks on either side, when you're in New Jersey, when you're in California, a law enforcement officer called me from LA and said, I'm going to tell you what happened to me. And he said he was very loyal to Ford Motor Company, but this was very, very distressing. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, how quickly did you realize the scope of this story? Because I think we've heard as enthusiasts and as journalists for years through the forums that these transmissions have been problematic, but not to this extent. People were concerned about shift roughness and that sort of thing, not necessarily a complete loss of power. I would certainly consider that to be a recallable safety issue, and I've certainly seen a lot of other recalls that have cleared that bar.
Yes.
Right,
and in fact, you're exactly right. There have been recalls for precisely these fact sets. You're exactly right. What tipped it for me? After the SEC filing, I just did a basic story on how serious is this and what's this class action. I actually knew nothing about it. So I wrote just what I considered a very standard story. When that story ran, I was inundated. We were flooded with phone calls from all over the United States, emails all over the United States and actually foreign countries, because they said, we're not crazy. We feel like we've been told this is our imagination, and many people were not even aware of the case. They didn't know. Some people are members of the class action by default. They didn't even know. It's 2 million people affected, and 1.5 million of these cars are on the road. Where, for me today, when I see these vehicles on the road, on the highway, I'm mindful of my driving, because I know there are some drivers who will lose power, that they can just slow down in ways that they can't control.
Phoebe, what do you say to critics who say, uh-oh, here we go again. The plaintiff attorneys have gotten a hold of Phoebe. Mm-hmm. They did all this research.
And Ford said that, actually.
She doesn't have the time to do this research. Yeah. What do you say to that?
Well, I appreciate that and the opportunity to address it, because Ford did issue a huge statement yesterday, in fact, really condemning our reporting. And we addressed each point, citing their own documents, in fact. The answer to your question, was it Phoebe, was it the reporter or team of editors? We were working for 8 weeks around the clock. So we would start, I would start at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't leave or finish until midnight. Why the urgency? Some people would say you could spend 6 months on something, and I felt like, for me, it was that serious of a concern. People were calling and crying. In terms of who does the work or what's shopped, when consumers are calling me from all over America and they're telling me the very same story, but let me tell you the key about, is it a lawyer or somebody else? When the story broke, the first story on the lawsuit, I had a call. I've had more than one call from Ford engineers. But the single most important call was an individual who called me and said, here's the code language. When you go through lawsuits, when you go through documents, here are codes you need to look for that no lawyers would know. Only engineers know these codes. So it was shorthand for these transmissions. It was shorthand for problems and how they were dealing with it. So we were able to cut through very quickly because of a whistleblower. Since the story came out, I've had, I'll say, 3 to 6 current and former employees at Ford Motor Company in product development, quality control, and engineering, drivetrains, just every level. I've had calls from people who drove them, testing them, trying to break down the problems, where they've actually sent me their credentials with the years 2011 to present, because they're to prove that they're telling the truth. So the short answer, I appreciate the criticism, but the things that we had and access, but that we've added, has been simply incredible to the internal documents and now what we've moved the story forward. Just this week, 3 members of Congress have called for immediate review.
3 senators, no?
2 senators and a House chairman who oversees NHTSA. So Highway Safety has said immediate review of Ford Motor Company. What did the company know and when did they know it? Because what the documents indicate is the company knew of a multi-billion-dollar problem and went forward anyway, even where the emails say, we'll deal with it. Get the cars to the dealership, we'll deal with it.
I think that's where the forgiveness, the inherent forgiveness of the American consumer starts to erode, is when you find out that an automaker knew that there was a problem before a car came to market, and that they haven't systematically addressed that over time, or that.
And today, right? So someone said to me, one of the folks I talked to said, this is an old story. This happened these were developed in 2010 and 2011. And I said, but they're used to present. It is an entire decade of using the DPS-6 transmission.
Yeah.
And today, for the first time, Ford Motor Company issued expanded warranty to cover 2017, never done before today.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. This just broke today.
This broke today. They made the announcement quietly to their dealers the day after our story came out.
So that was
July 12th.
what, about a week ago? Or?
It was exactly 1 week ago. Within 24 hours of our story, they quietly sent a letter to all their dealers around America and said, if people come in a 7-day period, July 12 through July 19, if they have these clutch issues, I've interviewed people. They've said to me they've replaced their clutches with every other oil change. I've talked to people. Now, these are vehicles that are no older than 2011, so that's how old they are.
Yeah.
So this is for clutch replacement. And so people, they have now 1 day. We broke the story today, and that offer goes until tomorrow. You need to get to the dealership.
Why would they only do a week?
I don't know, because
And this is a secret warranty, so only if you ask the dealer to do something.
If you go into the dealership and you say you're having transmission issues,
they'll take care of you.
They'll address the situation based on this. Why 1 week? I called, emailed, and texted for a comment from Ford, and the company did not respond.
You know, a little bit of background from how I've seen this issue, because, Chris, you're right. This is nothing new. You know, we've been hearing about this since Ford and others, not just Ford, went to dual clutch transmissions. And, you know, we don't need to get into the weeds on it, but a dual clutch transmission does not have a torque converter. So it doesn't launch off the line like every American who drives an automatic transmission is used to. You got to step into it more. Mm-hmm. And so when the first complaints started to arise, Ford said, no. This is how they all work, because it's a dual clutch. I also know this is what they call a dry clutch DCT, dual clutch transmission. And I won't mention names, but I remember going back to the time when the car first came out, a supplier of wet clutches told me this just isn't going to work. They're trying to defy the laws of physics.
Well, and in fact, Volkswagen changed course, if you recall, right? They were doing these, and they said this is just not working, and they went in a new direction. And I wanted to go back to the. Please continue.
Well, just two other things. Dual clutch transmissions can wear out more quickly in certain driving situations. So, like if you're just inching up to a traffic light, you know, your foot's on the gas. The clutches are slipping. You know, in a torque converter, you don't have that problem. Torque converter, step transmission, you don't have it. And also, there's a few other instances, like if you're on a hill and, you know,
every other
you don't
caller
have
tells
your
hill
foot
stories.
on the brake. The transmission to hold the car in place, the clutches are slipping. And again, if you have a dry clutch, it tends to wear out a whole lot faster. And the reason you'd go with a dry clutch is you do get better fuel economy with it, and it's cheaper. But
people say their manual vehicles work great. I mean, they love these.
It's a different transmission.
Right, but I mean, it's amazing. They'll call and say, just for the record, in case no one's told you today, I love my manual. So
look, full disclosure, I have a Fiesta ST with a 6-speed manual. I love the car.
People love it. They love it.
Yeah, it's a great argument for the ST. Can I ask what sort of remedies they're offering now for this 24-hour period from now?
You need to come in and have a repair certificate that you've come in. Then if they can't fix it on the spot, they'll come in, but it's to repair the clutch at no cost, whereas before there was a cost at a certain level.
So that indicates they believe they have an actual fix for this, which to this point we've seen a lot of attempts at remedies, but never really fully satisfactory fixes for the behavior of this transmission, right? So it's probably more of the same. They haven't developed a new fix as far as you're aware?
As far as I'm aware. They're optimistic about the potential, And now NHTSA is looking at this, and again, the House chairman that oversees and the 2 senators have said this requires immediate attention. From a congressional standpoint, we're very concerned.
In your story, you also had an instance of somebody who said the car just suddenly accelerated away. Personally, I don't put any credence in that whatsoever. I don't believe in sudden unintended acceleration.
Well, it's interesting because we had, in one of the documents that we reviewed, the term was a slingshot, is that it happened. So there are different terms used with NHTSA documents and other things, but that's something that I think will be investigated.
Yeah.
One number of the callers pointed out that when the F-Series had an issue on the transmission, it was recalled immediately and fixed, like boom. So folks have said to me, why are some vehicles recalled and others aren't?
Well, I can only speculate in this case. There was probably a fix for the F-Series transmission. The only fix for this one is the dual clutch one is rip it out and put back something else in.
Yeah. Or here's your new car.
Or here's a new car. That's the only fix.
What do you think is a reasonable solution in the current situation?
I don't know, because there are plenty of other Focus and Fiesta owners who have never had a problem whatsoever, love the vehicles. Maybe they were more in tune of how a DCT drives and didn't have any objections to it. So I'm not sure how you resolve this when you have a body of owners who say, I don't know what you're talking about, but so many others who have had problems and for years now. It wasn't like a little blip and it went away.
Well, one thing that was so compelling is in interviewing a number of engineers, current and previous with the company, and looking at the internal documents, they said, they would take out customer vehicles and it would break half a dozen times with the Ford engineering team doing the review. So that's what was so striking to us. You had your best drivers, people who knew how everything worked, and they were challenged as well. So.
Is there any sort of demographic data around the vehicles and the owners? Like, are they, from certain areas of the country because there's more hills that they, are wearing those clutches out, or is it, certain age groups because they just don't expect the transmission to behave that way?
Tends to be, because it was such a best-selling vehicle, it is, it reaches everybody. We would say younger and older, hills for sure. But it's really comprehensive and the detailed. One man I interviewed was a truck driver. He drove a truck for a living, and when he went to the dealership, they told him that he wasn't driving properly, and he in fact probably didn't really understand transmissions and how they worked, and he said he needed to get out of there as quickly as possible.
Before he punched somebody in the face.
He was really insulted. But this will be something we'll be monitoring. This is a very serious issue.
Yeah. Okay, our viewer, Big Barney, wants to know who designed the transmission?
The transmission, it was a Getrag transmission.
Hey, did you talk to the people at Getrag at all?
I read a lot of their internal documents. I know that they since have been acquired, in fact, by Magna.
Yeah.
And so, no, I read a lot of their internal materials, and I don't know that the design has been the question as much as its use. Although, actually, I take that back. One of the emails said this is a design flaw when Ford was looking to assign blame in some of the internal documents. They said that Getrag needs to pay for this because it's a design flaw. So thank you for reminding me. I had to think about that. Yeah. So I think that's the answer.
We got another comment from Aussie2U. So I'm guessing this comes from Australia. He said, one honest mechanic said the dry clutch, dual clutch, could not expel the pad material, and that contributed to the issue greatly. I'm not sure I fully understand that. But, clearly there's wear in a transmission. Right. I don't know. Did any of your investigation turn up anything like that?
Well, on that note, we actually had a team of engineers and analysts discuss how it worked. And everybody's assessment was very, very different. But there were serious problems. And it was similar to an assessment like that. It had to do with the fluid, it had to do with the dryness, it had to do with how it was being used. It was a very problematic it appeared based on their own documents, problematic application. The question for us was why you wouldn't stop using it, and we understand that one of the factories was turned very quickly, so we would have to redo everything. But that's the thing, is doing it from 2011 to present. And of course, these vehicles are now discontinued.
In fact, we had another question there saying, let's see, because I want to give credit to whoever said it. Right Knight 70 wants to know, could this be a reason why Ford's dropping those models?
So many people have called to ask that question. And I've asked around, and I've been told no, that companies really want to leave traditional passenger vehicles.
And I believe that. Yeah. I mean, we've seen a historic shift in the market.
And they're at the end of their life cycle. Right. They're still cost intensive to develop new models. The sales are down, and I don't see that there's as much of a market for them anymore.
Right.
But the irony, of course, is that the F-Series revenue will end up offsetting, these what Ford calls billions of dollars in costs. And Ford has plenty of money. So I think, it's a company that's very proud about how well it manages its resources. So I don't think it hurts the company financially. It's just it's definitely it's a revenue, it's a cost.
Is there any documentation that you've seen in all these internal emails and files that point to a cost analysis that says, we could either stop production of this and fix it with something else, or recall these vehicles, versus if we just keep doing this incrementally and settling out over time that it...
Yes and no. So early on, immediately after the cars started being built, there was actually mention of a Ford internal meeting to change the transmissions almost immediately, and that was never done. So they said they voted on changing the transmission. They're moving to a more traditional transmission, and that was one of my questions for Ford Motor. Why did you not follow through on what was clearly recommended? And the second question you had was about recalls. No, there is nothing in any documentation that I've seen discussing recalls. It is the cost of increased warranties and litigation. Government fines, litigation, and warranties. And what the documents have also said is communication is more aggressive in states and countries with consumer advocacy. So, for example, California would be...
Yeah, at the top of the list.
At the top of the list.
I can understand the difficulties. Even if a group of engineers in Ford said, hey, we got to change the transmission, the train done left the station. And to call up Getrag and say, hey, guess what, guys, we need to change it. That's years in the making. To have the manufacturing capacity put in place to make all these changes, validate them, test them, all this other stuff. And to say, well, we're just not going to build those cars then. That means you're shutting down plants all over the world. You're throwing thousands of people out of out of work. It's real tough to be able to make a decision like that. Especially if in your mind it's like, these people just have to learn how to drive a DCT.
But keep in mind, this is important. The internal data shows before it went to the public, when they were in testing mode, they weren't driving properly for the Ford team developing the product. That's really, really important, because your point is absolutely valid about, did the public get it?
Yeah.
But the key to our story was, did Ford identify major driving problems with its own people? One of the engineers I interviewed said the people he knew wouldn't take them home. They wouldn't take them. That's before they were available to the public. They didn't want to be in them, and they didn't want their family members in them. So it's a very important distinction. Did the company, before it went out to the public, clearly have problems, and did they decide to move forward? They voted to change the transmission, and they didn't follow what appeared, based on their documents, to be their own internal recommendation. We should change. Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen?
I don't know. We're monitoring the federal regulators. We're monitoring members of Congress. I'm hearing from quite a few members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. They're very, very, their constituents are calling them now. So they were calling Ford. Now they're calling members of the House and the Senate saying, please help us do something. So I don't know what that will look like. What do you think it'll look like?
I don't know either. That's why I asked you.
All I know is it's going to be expensive.
Yeah, well, look, there's going to be congressional investigations. There'll be additional lawsuits. It's going to be expensive. And I don't know what the final result will be, whether owners are compensated in some way, shape, or form, or what.
Do you think it would be cheaper to just make, you said many people love their car. If you love your car, you keep your car.
Yeah.
Would it be cheaper for a company to offer a buyback where you could use it for another Ford vehicle? Apply the dollar amount spent to another product they offer?
That would likely be one of the things that comes out of this. And the only problem is, you know, as a consumer, wait a minute, I bought this car and now all you're doing is giving me a discount to buy another car. Most people will not like that. Some who are like, if their Fiesta or their Focus is, they were getting ready to replace it, woohoo, I get a discount on a new one.
But you're saying the car payments start all over. That's what I've, yeah.
Yeah, it's not like it's a make good. You know, as a consumer, at the very least, they're probably going to have to make up for any drop in residual value. That, okay, your car had this many miles on it, it depreciated this much, but because you had this transmission, it depreciated that much more, we're going to compensate you for that. That might be one of the things that comes out of it, but who knows? And once you get politicians involved, yowza, I mean, now who knows where it could go. But look, we're going to have to wrap this up, but all I can say is, Phoebe, what an amazing reporting job that you did. I mean, you have got something in your career that damn few reporters ever get. You know, full front page, 7 pages in the front page, in the front section of a Sunday edition, USA Today picking it up, others picking it up. Wow, I'm impressed.
But the most important thing I have to say is the letters I've received from engineers who've said thank you, that they feel redeemed, and the letters from consumers who've said, many lifetime loyal Ford families all over America, people love Ford Motor Company, and this has not been a positive experience for them. I want to be clear, many of the people I've interviewed are very loyal to Ford. And, but hearing from them and just hearing that someone is listening to them, that's pretty powerful. I probably have, I think, 700. I log everything. I call every caller back. I email every email. Yeah.
The investigation is just starting then for you if you just have to call back 700 emails worth of people. No, I think one of the nice things that you all did was you published excerpts of a lot of these emails, lending credence to all of this and putting a human face on it and saying that this is not just a technical issue, but these are real life scenarios that impacted these families these ways.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
We're good. And on that note, we will wrap up the show. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion. Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems. And by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv. Okay, I'd be remiss if I didn't read this last comment. Aussie2U wrote back to say, kudos to Phoebe for breaking that open publicly. Australia made Fiesta owners sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements.
Australia Ford?
Must have been.
Yeah.
Must have been.
Yeah. And then they apologized publicly with the settlement. Yeah.
Very interesting. What a story.
Thank you.
What a
And thank
story.
you, Australia.
Yeah. Real good. Well, we can